Mold is a major health hazard in the home, and we'll be focusing on that quite a bit. There's biological contamination. We'll have water that will be contaminated with sewage in many cases, and we need to be making sure that we're protecting ourselves so that we don't end up with health problems because we're working in that flooded home. We have lead dust as a hazard. Lead was used in paint extensively before about 1975, and so it's important that if we're doing removal of painted surfaces that were painted before that we keep the surface wet and that we're not creating a dust that will create a lead hazard. Same thing is true with asbestos. If we have a boiler or some ductwork that is insulated that has asbestos in it, tiles, again, be aware of that hazard. Make sure that we're using personal protective equipment and keeping that material wet. Carbon dioxide will be an issue, and we'll touch on that. And of course, just the normal cuts and punctures associated with working in these flooded homes. When we're dealing with flood water, they categorize flood water in different categories depending on what was in the water. Category 1 is clean water, such as might come from a broken water pipe or rainwater. Gray water, or Category 2, contains some contamination and microorganisms, such as might come from a dishwasher, sump pump, toilets with urine. Category 3 is water that contains pathogenic agents, and that is sewage, surface water flooding. There might be pesticides in that. We really don't know what's in that water, and that's really what we're looking at when we're doing a flood cleanup, is a Category 3 flood event. And so we need to be using caution because of what might have been in that water. There are certainly health effects due to exposure to mold, and I'm just going to read this right off of the slide. Scientific evidence links mold and other factors related to damp conditions in buildings to asthma symptoms in those with the chronic disorder. It doesn't cause asthma, but if you have asthma, it's a trigger for asthma attacks. So those that have asthma or other respiratory problems really need to be very careful about working around flooded homes because of the mold exposure. Mold can cause coughing, wheezing, and upper respiratory symptoms in otherwise healthy individuals. It can cause hypersensitivity pneumonitis in susceptible people, not something we'll typically see. This would be with people who are whose immunity is reduced for some major reason, and then lower respiratory illness in children. And so there are very documented health effects due to working in a moldy environment. The World Health Organization has also looked at a number of studies and determined that the evidence is available in different countries that show that occupants of damp or moldy buildings are at increased risk of respiratory problems. There's also clinical evidence that exposure to mold and other dampness-related microbial agents increase the risk of various conditions such as sinus irritation, sinusitis, and then also evidence that supports that there's diverse inflammatory reactions, things that can lead to infections. So it's critical that we take care as we're working in these mold-infested environments to protect ourselves and to make sure that we are doing the cleanup properly so that we don't have future mold growth in our homes. One of the main things that we're going to do to provide protection for us is to wear a respirator or mask. And the minimum that you should look for is on the mask, it should say an N95 rating or a HEPA filter or a P or N